Morning guys, welcome to Photoshop Friday. We're going to be going through rendering this wonderful chair. Now, welcome. Hopefully we'll be able to get through this stream today. We've had a bit of a few problems. Let's rewind. On Tuesday, we drew not this chair, but a similar chair in one-point perspective using sort of the exact same techniques I used to draw this chair. Let me just clean my glasses and realise it was quite so dirty. And on the Tuesday afternoon, my plan was to do a stream where we were in Photoshop. So Tuesday morning seems like a good plan. Tuesday morning we draw it. Tuesday afternoon we render it in Photoshop. So had all my little studio set up here so we could draw it and it would look pang. But the afternoon session was beset by what I can only describe as connection problems. So we've got a really good broadband connection here. The DL speed is ginormous and the upload speed is usually around about 10 meg. At the moment it's running at just under half a meg, and that's probably why this stream looks choppy as heck. So on Tuesday in the afternoon the internet completely shut down, and not like it was choppy and we were like losing loads of frames, but it just didn't work. And I suspect that that's going to happen today. So look, I mean, the situation is I can only try and do this. I've gone into OBS, which is the streaming software that I'm using, and I've tweaked all the settings. It sort of is dynamically changing what the video bitrate is on the basis of like how strong the connection is. But the connection is so whack at the moment that I expect that the actual video quality is going to be between dismal and atrocious. Nonetheless, let's see if we can get something done. So hopefully you guys were here on the Tuesday session and have drawn a chair. If you've drawn a chair, ideally get it open in Photoshop. If you don't have a chair that you've drawn, then all you need to do is to follow the link is either in the chat or in the description for this video. There's a link to a G drive file, and the G drive file is this JPEG. So all I've done is I kind of redrew the artwork that I created on Tuesday because I didn't especially like it. Man, I've drawn quite a few of these chairs now in preparation, and it turns out that I'm not great at drawing whilst I'm stressing about a live stream dropping continuously. So excuses aside, I've kind of redrawn it in a way that I'm a little, I don't know, marginally happier with. It's still not particularly good. But now we've got this open in Photoshop, we're gonna hopefully get it looking a little bit nicer. As always, when we're working in Photoshop, guys, we're going to have to prep the artwork so that we can get it to work. So we're going to have, you see on the layers, we've got it as a background. Click the lock so it stops being a background. Rename the layer. And we're going to prep it. So what I want is, at the moment, you can see the paper is horrible and grey. The pen lines, there's sort of colour information on them that we don't want. There's loads of underdrawing because of how I created the artwork. So I'm going to go to Adjustments, Desaturate. And it doesn't make a very big visual difference initially, but we just get rid of the sort of colour information that's come in from when I took the photograph. We're going to create, on the Layers panel here, a new Levels layer. So we get a little histogram just here. Drag the white point to the left so that we can make most of the page nice and white. This tower of pixels on the histogram here is the white point for the artwork. This is the page for the artwork. This is the actual white of the paper. So if anybody's on either the Discord chat or the YouTube chat, if you guys could just give me a shout in either one of them chats, just to confirm my suspicion that the video quality is balls, and then at least I'll feel like I've got some kind of handle on it. So most of the pen lines, I've dragged the black line up now, most of the pen lines are reasonably black. Most of the page is pure white now. I'm going to use the dodge tool, which is this brush just here. I've got it set to highlights with a lower exposure, 20, making sure I'm on the sketch layer. And I can use this tool to get rid of any remaining marker underdrawing. So I use like just a regular grey marker to do a lot of the sort of perspective planning for this and the initial draw, so that the first time you put pen to paper, you've kind of already got an idea of how it's going to look. Okay, so that looks pretty much okay for what we need it for. I'm going to click on the levels layer, click Control E, flatten it down onto the sketch layer. So we've now just got a single layer which has got our white and nice crisp black. Yosho says, stream looks good to TBH. To be honest, I was kind of surprised by that because on the YouTube studio, it literally keeps firing up a little. It's just done it now. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Not at all stressful. So we're going to set the sketch layer here to multiply. So that means that the white of the page is transparent now, and we're going to be able to see the black. Well, the render that we're going to do today, we're just going to be doing a not like super intensive render. But if you stick around, I've got one of the guys who was here on Tuesday who did a sketch of a chair on Tuesday, has done a super intensive render, and it looks boss. It looks crazy, actually. I was really surprised when he sent it over. So, and he's given me permission to share that, but I'm going to tease that now. We'll have a little bit of a look later when I've done mine, which is going to look whack in comparison to his. So I've set, remember guys, we've got to use HSB for this. So we've got H and S set down to 0. I'm going to set this to, say, 50% B, brightness. I'm going to make a new layer underneath sketch. Click Alt backspace on the keyboard. Remember, Alt and backspace flood fills the layer or whatever selection you've got with your foreground color. So we're going to be doing a fairly sort of basic rendering method today, but we're going to be using a very particular kind of masking to do it. So in the past, we've used sort of, when we're working underneath the sketch like this, we've used the polygonal lasso tool to select areas and sort of block those in. We've also used, didn't mean to do it. We've also used the paths to create super accurate masks, and super accurate masks, and then you can remove the sketch. We're going to keep the sketch for this one, but we're going to be using a slightly different way of working, which if you guys use a graphics tablet, you might find this slightly more useful. Now, it doesn't have to just be done with a graphics tablet, it still works really nicely for this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just start painting in sort of the broad overall shape of the chair. It's a chair. So I need to select just the top surface of the seat. So I could do that using the graphics tablet, but we're going to use the brush to make the selection, and we're going to use the quickmask tool to do that. So before we get started with this, I need you guys to set up the quickmask tool. So the quickmask is just here. If you double click, you have to make sure that you've got the selected areas as selected here. So normally the default, if you've not used this before, is that when you start and you paint, it selects everything apart from the area you've painted. It'll make sense in a second. But for the way that we work, it's more intuitive that where you paint when you come out of quickmask is selected. So let me show you what I mean. So if we go into quickmask, which is Q on the keyboard, or you hit this button just here, then you use a brush. So let's use this brush here. should be in quickmask. Sorry, now we're in quickmask. You go in quickmask, do some painting. When you come out of quickmask, the area you painted is now selected. So I want to be able to use this to do these nice hard edge selections, and then I can switch over to using the soft edge brush to actually paint it in. But there's a problem here, and it's something you actually should just have seen if you were paying attention, which is that because I've got my soft edge brush set up to paint with, when you use a soft edge brush, and we're using our airbrush method, the spacing on the soft edge brush has to be set to around about 25%. And that lets you get this very nice smooth shading effect that we're usually shooting for. But if you then make that brush hard, and you need to do some painting in quick mask mode, you can see that we get this horrible caterpillar effect around the outside. So ideally what we would be able to do is we will be able to save the two kinds of brushes that we need to use, so that we have a brush that we can use for airbrush. So when we're painting, we can use the airbrush tool with soft edge brush, which has got that 25% set for the spacing. And then we also need a hard edge brush, which has got 0% spacing set. Unfortunately, we can do this. It's trivially easy to do. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to set these two up. Let's pop out a quick mask. I'm going to go to Window, Brushes. Let's just get rid of all of these. Let me just get rid of all of it. I've already got a lot of brushes because I use brushes all the time. All old brushes. Blech. Let's get rid of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my soft edge brush up like this. And I usually have it set to, let's say, 20% opacity. I don't know that it's going to save that. So we've got, let's go to the brush settings here. Let's double check everything is set for this. Let's paint them down to 23. Yeah, that looks lovely. Nice. Smooth and set a little bit. We don't want anything else. 0% hardness. Fine. So I'm going to just save this now. Airbrush. Nope, let me just undo that. Right. What I don't want to do is I don't want include tool settings. I want to be able to use this brush anytime that I'm in. So say I drop into the clone stamp tool, I want to be able to use this brush. Say I drop into the eraser, I want to be able to use this brush. If you set include tool settings when you're saving a brush, it is ginormously annoying because that brush, every time you click on it, will automatically switch to the paintbrush, which is fine if you have all of them set up like that. But the way that I like to work is I have the shape of the brush set and the spacing and all of these details, and then I can switch and I can use it in any one of the different sort of tool settings that I've got. So if I want to use it for the clone stamp tool or the dodge tool or something like that. So deselect include tool settings. And I don't want capture brush size in preset because I'm going to be continuously dynamically changing it. So we've got the airbrush. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make that brush hard, so 100% hardness. And then in the little brush settings window, I'm going to drop the spacing down to 0. So now we get our nice smooth shape. Spacing 0, 100% hardness, and I can save this as hard brush. So I can use that. Let me just double check that I saved it with the right settings because I was in a rush. Yeah, hard brush. Right. So when you're painting, you guys know that I don't like to have all of these windows and to be going in and out and changing the windows. So try and teach a way where we're using the keyboard and you use a little bit of your instinct so you can work organically. And the idea is that when you have to go into the Chrome of the software and make changes in the actual settings using the mouse. It can pull you out of painting, it can pull you out of the flow state. But there actually is a setting that lets you switch between brushes. There's a key combination, and it is the I was going to just expect, so we've got these buttons here, these keys here, the smaller than and larger than key, the comma and the full stop. When you switch between those. Basically, it sees this brushes panel as just a ginormous list of brushes, and it will let you just toggle between them, switch between them like this. So that's nice for us because we can be working and creating like a mask, and then immediately switch to the airbrush. And that's actually what we're going to do. So just keep this open so that I can easily access it and see it. I'm going to go into the quick mask, make sure that we're on the hard brush. I'm just going to select this, and I'm not worrying about the back because we're going to create a mask in a minute, which is going to mask the whole object out. And because we're painting, I can switch colours, clicking X, and just paint out the front surface. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. If that makes sense, just let me know that it makes sense, because I'm not certain that it's explained especially well. So I've switched over just by using the keys, clicking the comma key, reduce the opacity of the brush, switch over to white. I'm just going to put a bit of shading across, and also changing the size of the brush dynamically. So we can start building up our nice sort of three-dimensionality of the shape. So I want it to be darker just here, because it's going sort of into the back of the chair. I think I want to have a slightly darker just here, so that there's a stronger contrast for this highlight just here, because it kind of lifts up just here. And then we've got the colour working around just here, so that we've got this nice sort of feeling of flow. So quick mask, switch over to the other brush, and I'm going to select the top part of this just here. So I'm still working with a mouse, just out of sheer bloody mindedness. But if you can imagine that you're using the graphics tablet, then working like this, because you're using the brush to make the selections, becomes extremely intuitive, and it's a very organic way of working. So switch back over using the key. Opacity pull down again. And kind of reproduce that process again. So just to, in case you have been asleep under a rock, this, what I'm doing here is holding down Shift, click off the back, and when you use that, hold down Shift, Photoshop does this kind of nice dot to dot effect, and it lets you get these very nice sort of straight lines. And because we can work backwards and forwards, we can build up a nice gradient that will be very difficult to do using the sort of the normal gradient tools in Photoshop. So we've got this slightly more complicated shape just here, but again, because we're going to be using this quick mask technique, it's very easy to make the selection that we need. So I'm actually just going to select just the front section of this chair. So let's say, for example, I've got this area selected, but when we work with the paths in the past, obviously you can keep coming back to those paths, you can keep selecting those paths, but the moment that I deselect this shape, that selection is gone. So it's actually possible to retain that. If you're used to using paths, you can save that selection as a path, just exactly like this. You just click this button at the bottom of paths, make work path from selection, and we can use that exactly the same way as we've used all of the selections and stuff in the past, the paths in the past. Or you can create a new alpha channel like this, which you can pick up as a selection at any time. So I think I'm probably gonna use the paths. Chair back front, does that make sense? Chair back front. Chair back front. So if I need to come back and use this selection later on, which I might, then I'm going to use that method to do it. So in fact, I actually kind of wasn't finished with it, I was just showing you that. I'm not 100% certain how I'm going to render this exact bit. We'll figure it out as we go along. We've got this sort of inset section here. So I'm going to mask this. Nope, wrong. I'm so used to using that method, switching over. All right. Okay, and this top section here is a little bit more of a complicated shape. I'm just going to try and break it down. So what I've done here is I've actually had a sort of smooth edge there, but what's nice is because I can switch back into quick mask mode. So now I can get that slightly harder edge across there. I'm just going to make this selection now. You notice that I'm not worrying about cutting out the center of this part of the object, because when we make the mask at the end, or not at the end, just in a bit, then that's when it's going to be useful to do that. It looks like that's going to be quite a strong contrast, that shape. So now let's look at making all of the front edges. So this should be pretty easy. And I'm actually going to do them all in one go. So I'm going to make one set of selections. Because I want them to feel kind of like they're that's not what I want. Kind of like they're sort of parallel. And working on them all simultaneously can achieve that quite nicely sometimes. So in my mind, this wing section here sort of fades to nothing just here. So we'll pick that edge up shortly and fix that. And again, you can see I'm not worrying about this sort of back surface, because of when we make the mask for the overall object, that'll all be taken care of. So they're all selected there. Drop out of quick mask, switch brushes. Hopefully should be able to work a sort of like quite nice dynamic sense into them. Okay. Just spotted that by force of habit, I've dropped into using this tool. Apologies, it's not what we were covering today, but obviously as you guys develop your own toolbox of techniques, you will use the ones that you're most comfortable with, the ones that you're most familiar with. Okay. So let's make the selection of this edge just here. It'll be interesting to do. So I want this section at the bottom to be in shadow because it's facing away. And the top section is going to be illuminated with a sort of highlight across here. It's got that right sort of sense of three-dimensionality just there. So I'm just going to make the same selections along here. To do this bit just here because there's a pain in the neck with the Right, hold on. So because the machine that I'm using is a touch screen, I can just rotate the page around like this. It's only rotating the page around. The artwork itself is technically still upright on the artboard, but the artboard as a whole is getting spun round. It's quite a nice way of working. And also because of the, I think I mentioned this sort of biometrics of the way that your arm works when you're drawing, it means that you can always be rotating the artwork so that you're accessing that curve that's sort of built into your drawing arm. So at the end of when you're doing this, by the way, if you ever do use this, if you just press escape on the keyboard, it will automatically plop you back into sort of regular drawing mode and rotate the artwork around correctly. So let's go into using the airbrush. I'm just going to carry on using the mouse because I quite like using the mouse for some of this stuff. White's the foreground. Push this bit into shadow. And you see that we've got this nice sort of sculptural shape. I do kind of want to have more of a shadow around this section just here. So that works pretty well. I feel like that's got a good sort of shape to it. So the next bit that I need to do is I need to shade the little sort of sub cushions just here. And because they're kind of geometric shapes, I'm just going to use this polygonal lasso tool. So we're cheating the curve around there. So I'm just going to use this to throw a slight shadow across these sections here. And in fact, since I've got it and we're working before like this, I'm going to use this simultaneously on here so that I can get as consistent an effect as possible. So these ones I'm offsetting it slightly so that there's more of a sort of top-down shadow on it. Just want it to feel like the cushioning goes up and over a little bit for each one of these. And I want the highlight to come in as well. Yeah. Don't press that button. I'm not sure that I actually love that effect, but it at least sort of communicates that. So on the on the YouTube chat, guys, you may have just noticed that somebody has posted up, "Hi, it's me, your son Warwick." Me, Warwick. Now I'm going to go out on a limb now and guess that that's my son, Warwick. So, hello Warwick. Obviously you're sitting inside now. I hope that you have finished doing the English grammar test that the school sent through for you, that you've watched that science video that's on the Chromebook that I wanted you to watch, and also, if you get a chance, I'd like you to do TT Rockstars and some read theory, please. That would be ideal. There you go. That's convenient, isn't it? I don't have to go in the house to explain to him what he needs to do. I bet you're glad you came on the YouTube feed now, kid. Right. So I'm just going to make a selection over here using the same method. So this is just going to work in the exact same way. So I'm not going to over labour the point. I mean, there's loads of different techniques that we could use to sort of make this a little slightly more sculptural. But really what I want is just... Someone says webcam died. When did webcam die? Okay. Webcam back? No, webcam died. So it remains unclear whether you guys can hear or see me. Well, I'm just going to unplug and replug in the USB cable for the webcam. Okay, it looks like we're having some minor issues just here, which is real good. I'm a big fan of this, love it a lot. Broadband's working, everything's working, and now the actual hardware that I've got seems like that's not working, so I'm overjoyed with this. Right, I think we've switched over to using the other microphone by default, so I've got a little audio thing set up just here. Right, real crappy. Right, forget it. We're just gonna, you don't need to see my mush to be able to understand what we're doing with this. I'm just gonna carry on. So, I'm just gonna do what we did before. Just imagine that your flipping webcam just spontaneously dies when you're streaming. Why would that not happen? Sure. So we've got that same kind of effect just there. That seems okay. Okay, so it sort of looks more or less alright where we are now. It is at least not a disaster. I'm just going to cheat and use the graphics tablet to add a little bit of extra detail in just here. So I'm going to put a shadow in that drops in over both sides here. That looks about right. Put our little highlight across here. So can just double check, can everybody hear me? It would be awesome if you could just drop me a message saying that audio, yeah, audio changed as well. Can you, I don't know if you can hear me. I can still see the audio input ticking up and down. We've got just this sort of pretty rubbish, just a picture of my face now. I guess I'm my own mascot now, that's good. Okay, good. So I'm just gonna, because we've got this sort of inset shape just here, I'm going to just make this selection over this shape. Come out of quickmask. Just add a slight extra depth onto that. Okay, the audio is working. Thank you for people who let me know. So you'll notice one of the things that I did in terms of changing this artwork is that we've now got more legs. Somebody pointed out that the chair did not have the right number of legs. That was one of the main impetuses that burned me. So I had to go in and fix that. So hopefully now we've got the right number of legs. Well, you can't quite tell whether there's another one behind, there probably should be, but... So I'm just going to render this as a cylinder. A bit of shadow across the top. Make that pop a little bit more. Nice. We also cheated and used an ellipse guide, which is it cheating? It's not really cheating, but it's kind of a cheat. So I'm just going to try and sort of freestyle this a little bit now. So just dropping some shading in to add some three-dimensionality to this. So hopefully it will read it as slightly more 3D than it currently does. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Let's just add a bit of depth to these wheels. What am I doing? Use the graphics tablet. So hopefully some of this will make a little bit more sense when we drop into a masked version of this artwork. So let's just getting there. I think normally I would be tempted with these little wheels to actually just use photographs of wheels, because if ever there was a case where you shouldn't be reinventing the wheel, it's when you're literally reinventing the wheel. But we should be able to make these pop okay using some of this trickery. Okay, they don't look too bad. It's just so I'm going to be using the graphics tablet for some of this now. Just Just need to lift these sections of the artwork up. Then what I'm going to do is to create the mask for the whole thing. And then go through making way too many obsessive changes, adding colour and stuff. Okay, right. So that kind of works. Haven't really done much with this. Because of how we're going to mask it, I actually don't need to draw all of that in. Let's just go. So I want it to be darker, the top and bottom, like this to imply the curve. And then I want it to be even darker here. And I guess just here. And again, I'm not being maximum careful about how I select the outside sections of these because they are going to be included in our overall mask when we make that. This one is slightly better illuminated, so I can spend slightly longer on it. It's still going to have the same kind of vibe to it. This section is going to be in strong shadow. Front to be in shadow as well to make it clear that it's going into the surface. That. This bit in shadow. This bit here, then zip, 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 zip. Have a bit of illumination on this bit to make it clear that it's sort of a different shape. Okay, so now's the time for us to create the mask. So I'm going to attempt to use the magic wand tool to do this first of all. To make sure on the sketch layer, select this. And we're actually going to use the quick mask just to double check how that's worked. The answer is not especially well, but not that badly. So again in the quick mask, I'm literally just going to select the areas that I want to make sure are inside the artwork. This is a really nice, easy way of doing that, using the quick mask, and it's quick to make masks, which is, I guess, why those geniuses at Adobe gave it that name. Can you maybe tell that I gave up a little bit when I was drawing the wheels on this? I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to do them, so I just did them in a very basic way. Like I said, I think probably the way that I would do this if I was going to be normally working like this would be to use just a photograph of a set of wheels. Okay, let's just come out of quick mask. We use the magic wand again. Add that to the selection. Add that to the selection. Add that to the selection, and this, this und this. Actually, that's not part of it. Right, Q. Let's just expand that selection by 2. Command Shift I to invert the selection, click on the layer, and then smash layer mask. Damn, guys, look at that. Nice. And it looks 3-dimensional, which is obviously the goal. I think that we just might have fallen off the internet. If you guys are able to see or hear me, then let me know. The last thing that I want to do, now that my little picture in the corner has stopped working, is for the main image to stop working and I'm just sitting here in a shed talking to a computer. Which, to be fair, is probably what it would say on my business card, but Phil Smith sits in a shed talking to a computer. Let me just clear this mask up a little bit. So I think we've got this looking reasonably okay. Oh man, I never even named the layer. It is undoubtedly a chair. It has a 3-dimensional shape to it and a sensation of depth. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that it's got a sort of texture to it as well. So what I'm going to do is, normally you guys know that I will use a photographic texture, but we're going to make a texture today. So we're just going to create a new layer called texture, and this is a way of adding sort of a slight bite to your artwork. So I'm going to fill it with no, let's go 50% grey, mid grey, filter, noise, add noise. I'm going to add 100% or 400% Gaussian noise, blur more, and set it to overlay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Filter, where is it now? Stylize Emboss. And basically this creates a kind of a texture from your noise. So you can see that it's got a little bit of depth to it. And if I use the layer mask, then we can apply it to our artwork. I just wouldn't want it over the legs because they're made of metal or something. So I'm just directly painting the mask now. And so when you're working like this, what I can do is I can look at it and go, is that too strong of a texture? And if it is, if I want to apply it less, I can just pull down the opacity. If I want to add it slightly more, sometimes this can work nicely. If you go to Filter, Sharpen, Sharpen More, it kind of increases the definition of the texture, so you can then adjust it on the basis of that. So usually what I want is a real strong texture, and then you can pull the opacity down until it matches sort of what you want. So this looks like a chair if you made it out of a grey clay, which maybe you would make it out of grey clay, I don't know. Probably not. My God, I can hear the kids outside shouting mad stuff to each other. So if you hear some mad stuff being shouted by a kid, then I've got to let you know it's got nothing to do with me. I've never met them kids before. They've nothing to do with me, guys. I'd never endorse kids shouting mad stuff. Just making a couple of changes to the outside of these cushions. To sort of push them into the shape a little bit more. Sorry, we were saying something about it being made out of grey clay, which is not necessarily what you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select, say, the bits where we've got the texture applied, create a new layer mask, adjustment levels. Wait, adjustment layer is the word that I'm reaching for. And literally darken it down so it looks more like it's made out of the kind of material that a chair like this would be made out of. Then I'm going to add a new adjustment layer. So we've got, no, that's not what I wanted. We'll add a new adjustment layer, which is going to be hue and saturation, colorize, and I want to change the colour of the inset sections. So I'm going to invert that, and now just use the polygonal lasso tool we did before. So if I fill that with black now, white now on that layer mask, it will apply only to the selected areas. And again, you can make this selection just as easily using the quick mask. So let's have these little inset sections done in green as well. This is one of the things that's nice about peeling the colour out like this, is that you can then use it to make choices about sort of the colourways and things for how you want your artwork to look. Oh, actually I quite like that electric kind of look. Yeah, that's alright. Okay, well, alright. It's looking okay. So that's got an alright kind of feel to it. In terms of how the artwork is structured, it's still relatively simple. Okay, yeah, we're buffering a lot. Guys, I think I'm going to cut it off in a few minutes. Let's just make a couple of extra changes. I'm going to make a new layer, which is going to be called BG for background. Nope, let's use the airbrush tool. Don't play yourself, Phil. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to just put a gradient into the background. Like so. I can always reduce the opacity of that. Just to add a little bit more of a feeling of depth. And I can also move it up and down, depending on where I want it to be. So that's cool. I'm going to add a new layer in called shadow, wheel shadow. So we're on the airbrush now. 100% opacity. Click once, then Control T. Smoosh that down. And we can use that shadow for the wheels. Flatten all of them down to single layer, wheel shadow. Make one new layer called overall shadow. I do kind of the same thing, but this one we're going to put much softer in. And it's going to kind of represent the shadow of the whole thing. Now, one thing that we can do that's kind of nice, but it's a bit of a pain to do sometimes. Yeah, shall we try it? I'm going to make a new layer called, listen, I'm going to call it Shadow Test because it's tricksy. I've selected everything, fill it with black. So now I've got this sort of a shape. I'm going to Gaussian blur that. Now obviously this isn't a shadow sort of behind the object, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use perspective distort, like this. Okay, it's a bit of a trick. It's not quite working on this. Then reduce the opacity of this. You make a layer mask, and then I use my big gradient to sort of mask out the back. I can mask out this bit just here because that doesn't make any sense. But you get this slightly more realistic sort of shadow across the foreground. The other thing that you can do, let's just hide the background, hide the sketch, hide the shadows. A, Shift C, V. Oh, it's not, there's nothing on that layer. A, Shift C. So Shift C copies through the layers, and V pastes back in place. So I'm going to flip vertically, drag this down underneath everything else, everything visible. here's the clue, is I'm going to name this reflection. So what I'm going to have to do is, this is a bit of a pain, I'm going to just select, let's just hide everything here, just each wheel, and then move it underneath the wheel that it is the wheel for. If this works, it can look real nice. But it is a bit of a bodge. And then we'll just bin that. Show everything else. Reduce the opacity on this. Add a layer mask. And then pull the opacity right down. Doesn't always work. So let me show you what the other trick for doing shadows like that is, which I think I might have shown you guys before. Let's see if we've still got that. Is that still in place? Yeah. So you get your layer like this. I'm going to do blur, motion blur. What a vertical motion blur. Set it to multiply. Again, this is a bit of an experiment because this doesn't always work. The problem is that the wheels on this are an awkward kind of a shape. That's it. I think it is going to work. You just delete everything that isn't the... Yeah. So because we've got that motion blur and it kind of has the effect of creating sort of a reflection. I wonder if I combine those two together. Pull down the opacity on this one a lot. Okay, whatever. Oh dear. So I'm not super duper in love with this. I'm not certain that it's exactly what I wanted. Let's just try deleting that from this. Maybe lighten these levels up. But we've got something that looks pretty cool. We've spent about an hour on this now. So I would guess that about 20 minutes of that hour was me just complaining about the stream. But what we've not got is we've not got a piece of artwork that stands, as far as I'm concerned, without the sketch. We'd need to go in and make quite a few extra changes before I was happy to sort of remove the sketch, maybe reduce the opacity of it a little bit. But it's still necessary to hide a lot of the inaccurate masking that's come about from sort of the approach that I've taken today. But I'm happy with that. It definitely reads as a chair. It's got a sense of depth. It's got a sense of three-dimensionality. There's no ambiguity in terms of what the shape is for it. Let me show you one other thing real quick. We've talked before about having a method for filleting some of these front surfaces. And you can do this on the fly using the blur tool. So we'll set the opacity for this for 100%. So if I just go over areas where I want there to be a slightly softer edge, then I can create something that's a little bit closer to a rounded edge. Not that it's especially important for this, but it gives you a few more sort of organic approach methods for doing something that we've covered in the past. Right, Phil, stop clicking on this. We're gonna, I'm just gonna go nuts otherwise. But let me show you this. Now I teased this at the beginning. I mentioned a couple of times, sometimes that there's somebody called Yosho who joins in on the Discord chat, and he's one of the students at the university. Now Yosho has produced a man, it is a real beautiful render. He spent a lot longer on it, and he's done a lot more accurate masking, and he's used photographic textures, which is something that I think I've talked about a lot before. So I've just copied from the other window his artwork. Let's go new. Man, this blew my brain when I looked at it. Look at that. So this is from, when I first saw it, I was like, nah, he's gone in and done a CAD render. But it's not. It's just all Photoshop. He's got the 4 legs from what we did before. He's done what I recommended, that we've got little photographic feet, because why would you draw them? This sort of sculptural shape just here reads so much as a 3-dimensional shape. He's used the warp tool to create this sort of distorted mesh for the center section. Look at that here, look at the support for the head. This little bit around the outside, the way that the texture supports the shape for it. So guys, this is he's even done the shadowing sort of technique very similar to the way that we just did it. This is a really beautiful render. Obviously in a different style, and I guess quite a lot more sort of precise than the one that I've just done. But in his comment when I said, you know, you should be really proud of this, is he said, this is what happens when you've got too much time on your hands. And listen, there is a legit message behind that, which is that at the moment, a lot of us have got too much time on our hands. And at the end of this process, at the end of this, when we all when they've figured out how to get rid of COVID-19, some vaccine or whatever it is, when Bojo says that we can all go back outside,